Welcome to Chapter 4 of The Bronze Kings, The Hybrid's Burden. In Chapter 3, we watched Heron's business collapse under enhanced competition. We saw markets reward biological advantages without conspiracy or malice, just efficiency being profitable. We learned that Thalia is an Enochian order, providing quiet support that keeps the partnership's promise alive when markets fail too. Economic consolidation isn't philosophy. It's baseline merchants losing livelihoods while enhanced competitors thrive. But there's a third population. Nobody planned it. Nobody wanted it. Everybody needs to maintain the illusion that partnership works. This is Chapter 4, The Hybrid's Burden. Siduri is 30 years old. Sophia's daughter. Her enhanced mother processes quantum mathematics. Her baseline father understood philosophy. Siduri exists between two populations, fast enough to recognize she's inadequate, not fast enough to compensate for it. And she's sterile. Along with 17% of hybrids. Because biology is complicated when you're mixing genetics between species that are slowly diverging. Today, we see what unintended consequences look like when they have names, faces, and mothers who created the modifications that made their suffering possible. Sophia confronts maternal guilt and meets scientific responsibility. Thalia delivers diagnoses for conditions nobody predicted. Inara offers support that institutions can't provide. The bridge population was designed to hold the partnership together. Chapter 4, The Hybrid's Burden. Northern District, Uruk. 2850 BCE, same evening as Chapter 3's Enhanced Merchant Gathering. Siduri understood maybe 70% of the conversation, and that 70% was enough to know she didn't belong. The enhanced merchants moved through trade calculations with casual efficiency, making her cognitive processing feel sluggish by comparison. Arwad was explaining copper delivery optimization from Anatolian mines, tracking 17 variables simultaneously: seasonal flooding patterns, tribal political shifts, bandit activity corridors, weather prediction models, caravan capacity calculations, alternative route probabilities, cost-benefit analyses across multiple scenarios, while simultaneously maintaining separate conversation threads about lapis lazuli pricing and tin scarcity projections. Siduri could follow the copper discussion. Could track maybe 11 of the 17 variables if she concentrated fully. But doing so meant losing the lapis thread entirely. By the time she'd processed Arwad's conclusion about optimal timing windows, the conversation had moved 3 topics forward to Carnelian trade networks from the Indus Valley. She sat at the periphery of the gathering circle, invited as courtesy to Gilgamesh's family but not truly welcomed as a participant. The other merchants included her in their visual scans, acknowledged her presence with polite nods, but didn't slow their discussions to accommodate her processing speed. Why would they? They were coordinating commerce over 3,000 kilometers. Efficiency mattered. And hybrid cognition was, by definition, less efficient than enhanced capability. 46 years old. Hybrid daughter of Sophia the Immortal and a baseline human father who died 30 years ago at age 61. Enhanced enough to live longer than baseline humans, maybe 120 years if Thalia's projections were accurate. Not enhanced enough to match the 180 to 200-year lifespans pure enhanced humans could expect. Cognitive processing is perhaps 40% superior to that of baseline humans. Inferior to enhanced humans by approximately the same margin. Perpetually in the middle. Perpetually inadequate from both perspectives. Carrot was now demonstrating risk assessment calculations, using his enhanced pattern recognition to process historical caravan loss data and project probability distributions for different route choices. Northern path through Heron territories, 15% loss probability based on current bandit activity and tribal confederation instability. Southern desert route, 8% loss probability, but 12% longer transit time. Probability-adjusted optimal choice depends on cargo value and delivery timeline urgency. He rattled off numbers that Siduri recognized were accurate. She could verify the calculations if given time to work through them manually. But Carrot wasn't working through anything. He was perceiving patterns directly. His enhanced cognition extracting probability distributions from complex datasets the way baseline humans recognize familiar faces. Instant. Automatic. Effortless. The other enhanced merchants were nodding, processing his projections, already moving to implications and applications. Siduri was still verifying his third variable when the conversation shifted to how resource scarcity would affect future route optimization strategies. She'd experienced this cognitive gap her entire life and had learned to mask it, to nod at appropriate moments, to contribute observations during the brief pauses when her enhanced processing cycles aligned with her slower rhythm, and to develop strategies for participating in conversations that moved faster than her cognition could fully track. But it was exhausting. And tonight, watching enhanced merchants coordinate commerce that would feed millions of people through networks her hybrid mind couldn't quite optimize, she felt the exhaustion more acutely than usual. The gathering space was Carrot's private residence, substantial but not ostentatious, reflecting wealth earned through capability rather than inherited privilege. Oil lamps cast steady light across low benches arranged in a circle for discussion. Clay tablets documented trade agreements. Water and dates provided refreshment, but no alcohol that might even slightly slow enhanced processing. The space was designed for efficiency, optimal acoustics for rapid conversation, comfortable seating that didn't distract from discussion, temperature control through strategic window placement, and read screens. Everything is optimized, including the cognitive requirements for participation. Ziva was speaking now, a luxury goods specialist who moved lapis lazuli from Afghanistan through Mesopotamia in 4 months, when baseline merchants required 6. Afghan sources report a 20% reduction in quality stone extraction this season. Scarcity will drive prices up. Enhanced merchants who've maintained relationship networks can secure preferential access. Baseline competitors will face supply shortages. She wasn't being cruel. Wasn't celebrating baseline merchant struggles and just stating market reality that biological advantages produced commercial advantages. Enhanced cognition meant better relationship tracking, faster negotiation, and superior risk assessment. The result was that merchants dominated trade through capabilities that progressively made competition from baseline, or hybrid, merchants impossible. Siduri had briefly tried commerce in her 20s, an apprentice with a baseline merchant who'd been kind about her superior memory and processing speed compared to his own and had felt competent until she'd attempted to coordinate with enhanced merchants and discovered that her disadvantages dwarfed her advantages over baseline humans compared to enhanced. She'd switched to partnership council administration. Record-keeping, documentation, and coordination work that didn't require optimal processing speed. Work where hybrid cognition was sufficient, even if not superior. Work that felt like settling rather than achieving, but at least allowed her to contribute meaningfully. The conversation had moved to discussing whether partnership institutions could survive economic consolidation that was accelerating despite political equality protections. Enkidu had arrived midway through. The gathering, grandson of Gilgamesh, probable successor to regional leadership. Enhanced, brilliant, and frustrated by partnership constraints, he viewed artificial limitations on natural hierarchy. Markets reward capability, Enkidu was saying. Partnership institutions can't prevent that without destroying the efficiency that feeds everyone. Economic consolidation isn't a conspiracy, it's biology producing outcomes through mechanisms political structures can't constrain. Several merchants nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable with explicitly acknowledging what everyone understood implicitly. Arwad was watching the discussion with an expression suggesting he was calculating political implications 3 moves ahead. Siduri felt the familiar squeeze of being neither. She understood Enkidu's logic, enhanced humans were demonstrably more capable at commerce. But she also understood baseline resentment at being marginalized despite institutional equality. And she experienced the hybrid reality of being excluded from both populations while supposedly bridging them. Enhanced merchants saw her as a diluted capability. Baseline merchants saw her as privileged because of her immortal parentage, despite her struggles. Neither population valued her perspective because neither population faced her particular combination of inadequacies. She remembered a baseline merchant gathering she'd attended last year. Local traders are discussing how to compete with enhanced networks. They'd invited her as a potential ally, a hybrid who understood both populations. But their discussions moved too slowly for her processing speed, dwelt on grievances she'd heard countless times, and proposed solutions she could calculate wouldn't work before they finished articulating them. She'd left early, frustrated by the sluggish pace, and had felt guilty about her impatience with people facing genuine marginalization. Had recognized she was experiencing the same superiority complex toward baseline humans that enhanced merchants felt toward her. Neither enhanced nor baseline. Superior to one population. inferior to the other, fitting nowhere, belonging to neither. The bridge that both sides walked across without noticing the structure bearing their weight. The enhanced merchant gathering was concluding 3 hours of coordinating commerce across continents. Siduri had contributed maybe 4 observations total, carefully timed to moments when conversations naturally paused. Her contributions were politely acknowledged, incorporated marginally, and quickly forgotten. Arwad approached as merchants departed. "Thank you for attending, Siduri. Your perspective is valued." The lie was kind but obvious. Her perspective wasn't valued. Her presence was tolerated out of respect for Gilgamesh. Enhanced merchants didn't need hybrid mediation because they weren't seeking compromise, they were optimizing systems that rewarded capability regardless of partnership principles. "Thank you for the invitation," she replied with equal courtesy masking equal dishonesty. She walked through Uruk's streets as darkness deepened. The city was quiet at this hour, most residents asleep. Enhanced humans required less sleep, maybe 4 hours compared to baseline 8. Hybrids fell in the middle, perhaps needing 6 hours. Another slight disadvantage that compounds across the lifetime. Another way biology determines capability, which in turn determines outcomes. The moon was waxing, providing enough light to navigate familiar streets without a lamp. Siduri had walked these paths for 46 years, knew every corner, every building, every shortcut. This was home. The only place she'd ever lived. Yet she'd never entirely belonged here, despite a lifetime of residence. She tried baseline communities and remembered visiting her father's family after his death, staying with baseline relatives who'd been welcoming but couldn't quite understand her. They'd aged while she stayed young. They'd struggled with concepts she processed efficiently. They'd treated her kindly but carefully, aware she was different even when they couldn't articulate how. She tried enhanced communities. Remembered educational gatherings where enhanced children learned faster, processed information more completely, and excelled at every measure of cognitive achievement. She'd been adequate, competent, never exceptional, constantly aware she was slower, less capable, fundamentally limited compared to peers who made optimization look effortless. 46 years of being neither. 46 years of mediating between populations that didn't value mediation. 46 years of carrying a burden she hadn't chosen, serving a role nobody appreciated, existing in the middle ground that felt like a void rather than a bridge. Tomorrow she had an appointment with Thalia. Medical examination. A routine health assessment that the immortal biologist insisted all hybrids undergo annually. Siduri had postponed it twice, uncomfortable with medical scrutiny that made her feel like an experimental subject rather than a person. But Thalia had been insistent, mentioning something about significant findings she wanted to discuss. Probably more data about hybrid lifespans or cognitive processing limits. More evidence that hybrids were a biological compromise rather than a synthesis. More documentation of the inadequacies she experienced daily. Siduri reached her quarters, modest but comfortable, reflecting the Partnership Council administrator's income. Not wealth like the enhanced merchants accumulated. Not poverty, like struggling baseline families faced. The middle ground is economically just as it is biologically. Sufficient. Adequate. Never quite enough. She fell asleep thinking about tomorrow's examination, wondering what new hybrid limitation Thalia had discovered, and calculating whether 46 years of being neither was preparation for a lifetime more or resignation to realities she couldn't change. Thalia's medical facility, Uruk. 3 days later. The facility looked more like a temple than a clinic, which made sense given that immortal medicine operated at levels that seemed divine to humans who didn't understand the science underlying apparent miracles. Crystalline walls grown from quantum-engineered lattices that stored medical data in molecular bonds. Bioluminescent panels that provide light tunable to specific frequencies for different diagnostic purposes. Instruments that looked like sculptures but functioned as sensors capable of reading biological processes at the cellular level. The space was beautiful and unsettling at the same time, advanced technology wrapped in an aesthetic that made it feel organic rather than artificial. Thalia was waiting, 55,000 years old but appearing perhaps 40 in human terms. Immortals age differently, their cellular repair systems maintained optimal function for millennia before degradation began. She created the enhancement process 6,000 years ago, bioengineering it to elevate baseline human cognition to levels that now dominated commerce and threatened to consolidate political power. She'd also created the hybrids, had encouraged unions between enhanced and baseline humans, believing their children would naturally bridge the populations, and had medical facilities across 3 continents monitoring hybrid health to track how the biological middle ground manifested across generations. Siduri. Thank you for coming. Thalia's voice carried warmth that felt genuine despite the doctor-patient context. She'd known Siduri since birth, delivered her, monitored her development, documented her as a case study, and cared about her as a person, another complicated relationship in life, full of them. You said you had findings to discuss, Siduri replied, settling onto the examination platform that adjusted automatically to her body position. I do. But first, standard assessment. Thalia activated diagnostic instruments, crystalline sensors extending towards Siduri without touching, reading biological information through quantum resonance that felt like gentle pressure against the skin despite no physical contact. Siduri had undergone these examinations annually for 46 years. Knew the routine. Sensors read cellular repair function, cognitive processing patterns, organ health, genetic stability, immune system efficiency, and metabolic optimization. Quantifying every biological process to track how hybrid genetics manifests across the lifespan. Cognitive processing within normal hybrid parameters, Thalia narrated, reading data from bioluminescent displays only she could fully interpret. Memory formation is stable. Pattern recognition is adequate. Processing speed is consistent with previous assessments. No degradation of function. Good news delivered in a clinical tone that made it feel like a minimum acceptable outcome rather than cause a forceful celebration. Siduri was functioning as expected for her age. Adequate. Sufficient. Normal for someone, perpetually abnormal. Cellular repair appears healthy. Projected lifespan remains approximately 120 years, assuming no major illness or injury. You're aging at a rate between enhanced and baseline, expected given your genetics. More good news framed as a data point. She'd live longer than her baseline father but die decades before enhanced peers. Would watch some friends age and die while others remain vital for an additional 80 years after her death, another dimension of belonging nowhere. Organ function is all within acceptable ranges. The immune system is robust. Metabolic efficiency is good. Thalia paused, expression shifting from clinical assessment to something more careful. However, I've discovered some concerning patterns in hybrid biology that I need to discuss with you. Siduri felt alertness sharpen. What kind of patterns? Chromosomal irregularities that weren't apparent in childhood but are manifesting as hybrids reach full biological maturity. Thalia displayed something on the crystalline interface, complex diagrams that Siduri couldn't fully interpret but which showed cellular structures. Enhanced humans have optimized genetics that baseline humans lack. Hybrid genomes contain both optimization pathways and original baseline sequences. In most biological processes, this creates a middle ground function. In some systems, it creates complications. Meaning what, specifically? Meaning that approximately 27% of the hybrid population I've tested shows reduced fertility compared to both enhanced and baseline populations. 8% appear likely to have significant reproductive challenges. Thalia's hands were trembling slightly as she documented the data, barely perceptible but visible to someone who knew her. You fall into the first category. Your reproductive system shows chromosomal incompatibilities that may affect your ability to conceive. Not impossible, but estimated at perhaps 20 to 25% probability compared to 75 to 85% for enhanced or baseline women your age. The words landed with strange flatness. Siduri had never seriously considered children, difficult to imagine bringing new life into the world when she couldn't figure out where she fit in the existing one. But learning that choice might be biologically limited rather than personally deferred felt different. Possibility closing. Door locking before she decided whether to walk through it. This isn't just about reproduction, is it? Siduri asked, processing implications faster than Thalia seemed comfortable articulating. This is early evidence of speciation. Enhanced and baseline humans are diverging biologically. Hybrids caught in the middle of growing divide. Yes. One word carrying the weight of 6,000 years of intervention, producing outcomes nobody predicted. Enhanced genetics and baseline genetics are proving less compatible than we anticipated. The reproductive irregularities suggest that over generations, enhanced and baseline populations may become unable to interbreed successfully. Separate species rather than single humanity. Siduri absorbed this while Thalia watched, an immortal physician waiting for the hybrid patient to respond to the news that confirmed what Siduri had experienced her entire life socially. She was neither population because populations were fundamentally different. How long until complete speciation? Impossible to predict precisely. Centuries, certainly. Perhaps millennia. Depends on genetic mixing patterns, how enhancement propagates, and how baseline populations evolve. But the trajectory is clear, even if the timeline is uncertain. Enhanced and baseline are diverging. Hybrids are a transitional population experiencing both genetics until populations separate. And partnership is trying to unite populations that biology is dividing. Yes, Thalia said quietly. Political institutions assume biological compatibility. Reality is proving otherwise. Siduri sat with this revelation, which somehow wasn't a revelation at all. Just confirmation of what she'd known instinctively through 46 years of never fitting. Biology underlying social reality. Genetics explains exclusion. Can anything be done? Medical intervention? We're researching options. But enhanced genetics is a complex optimization, while baseline genetics evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. Making them more compatible might disrupt other biological functions. I can't promise solutions. Medical honesty meant that no solution existed. Maybe ever. I need to inform the hybrid community, Siduri said. They should know what we're facing. Agreed. And I need to tell your mother. She has a right to know about challenges you're experiencing. Siduri left Thalia's facility carrying knowledge that changed nothing about her daily reality but clarified why that reality felt increasingly untenable. Hybrids weren't bridges between populations. They were evidence of incompatibility. Living demonstration that the enhanced and baseline were becoming separate species, and that partnership institutions couldn't unite them through political structures when biology divided them at the cellular level. Hybrid quarter, Uruk. 6 days after the medical examination. The gathering space was modest, a communal building that hybrids maintained collectively, a neutral territory where neither enhanced nor baseline authority dominated. 17 hybrids had confirmed attendance, ranging in age from 23 to 62. Not many, the hybrid population was small, maybe 300 individuals total across all regions. Product of an experimental policy that immortals had encouraged 50 years ago and then mostly abandoned when results proved complicated. Siduri arrived early, arranging reed mats in a circle to create equal positions, no head seat. No hierarchy. Just hybrids gathering to discuss a shared reality that neither parent population fully understood. Lyra arrived second. 58 years old, hybrid from first generation, daughter of Ether the immortal and baseline mother who died 20 years ago. Enhanced enough to work in partnership with administrative systems. Not enhanced enough to compete with pure enhanced administrators. She'd chosen independence, building a life that didn't depend on either population, advocating for hybrid self-determination rather than mediation. Thalia told you? Lyra asked without preamble. Reproductive irregularities. 27% affected. Evidence of speciation. And you called a gathering to discuss this? To discuss this. With people who understand what it means to be caught in the biological middle ground. Others arrived over the next hour. Kemuel, 35, one of the fortunate hybrids without fertility issues, partnered with an enhanced woman whose family had complicated feelings about genetic dilution. Yasmin, 28, recently informed of likely reproductive challenges, is processing anger about being created for biology that didn't function as expected. Davor, 42, is still attempting to mediate between enhanced and baseline communities despite visible exhaustion. 17 hybrids total, each carrying a specific version of the general burden. Siduri waited until all were seated before beginning. Thalia has discovered that approximately 27% of hybrids show reduced fertility. 8% face significant reproductive challenges. The medical evidence suggests that the enhanced and baseline populations are diverging biologically. We're not bridges between populations, we're evidence of growing incompatibility. Silence settled as hybrids processed information confirming what many had suspected, a biological underpinning to social exclusion. Genetics explains perpetual inadequacy from both perspectives. Yasmin spoke first, voice carrying appropriate anger. So they created us as an experimental bridge project without knowing if hybrid biology would function properly? And we're discovering the structural problems decades later after being told we're the solution to their consolidation crisis? Thalia didn't predict this, Siduri said. Speciation wasn't anticipated. Enhancement was supposed to be modification, not separation. Not predicting doesn't excuse not considering, Lyra interjected. Immortals created an enhancement without fully understanding the consequences. Created us without knowing if hybrid biology would work as intended. We're experimental subjects discovering we're also unintended outcomes. Not all of us are affected, Kemuel protested. I don't have fertility issues. Many hybrids are healthy across all biological functions. You're healthy but facing family pressure about genetic dilution, Yasmin countered. Your partner's family worries about grandchildren being even less enhanced. They see hybrid genetics as a loss rather than a bridge. That's not success, that's enhanced population treating hybrid relationships as acceptable compromise while hoping genetics strengthen in the next generation. Kemuel didn't argue. His partner's family had indeed expressed concerns and had asked whether they'd consider genetic counseling to understand what their children would inherit. Davor spoke carefully, voice of attempted moderation. We're processing difficult medical information. Anger is understandable. But we need to decide how the hybrid population responds. Do we share this publicly? Keep private? Demand immortal intervention? What's our collective approach? We don't have a collective approach, Lyra said. We never have. Hybrids aren't a unified population, we're scattered individuals pretending to be a bridge when both sides walk over us without noticing. Some of us want to mediate. Some want independence. Some want to align with enhanced or baseline. We're as fragmented as the society we supposedly unite. The gathering circled through overlapping concerns that had defined hybrid existence for 50 years, now sharpened by medical revelations. Economic exclusion. Can't compete in enhanced trade networks due to processing speed limitations. Seen as privileged by baseline merchants despite facing systematic disadvantages. Neither population's economic systems were designed for hybrid participation. Social isolation. Enhanced gatherings move too fast. Baseline gatherings move too slowly. Neither population adjusts pace for hybrid processing. The result is perpetual outsider status in both communities. Educational challenges. Baseline curriculum feels remedial. The enhanced curriculum is overwhelming. Educational systems optimize for their populations, treating hybrids as anomalies requiring special accommodation rather than valid learners. Political marginalization. Both enhanced and baseline debate about hybrids rather than with them. Used as symbols in consolidation arguments. Perspectives are valued only when supporting predetermined positions. Each hybrid shared a specific version of the general pattern. Davor described partnership councils where enhanced members spoke too rapidly, while baseline members moved too slowly, and no one adjusted the pace. Yasmin described being rejected by the baseline community as too different, while the enhanced community treated her as not capable enough. Kemuel described his partner's family as being kind while clearly wishing their son had chosen a fully enhanced partner. The economic dimension was particularly sharp. Several hybrids had attempted to engage in commerce, only to discover they couldn't compete with enhanced merchant networks and were seen as privileged interlopers by baseline traders. One hybrid woman described trying to establish a textile trade, too slow to coordinate complex networks like enhanced merchants, too advantaged by immortal connections for baseline merchants to view her as a legitimate competitor. Educational exclusion created an identity crisis from childhood. One hybrid man described an enhanced academy experience where he'd been adequate but never exceptional, constantly aware he was slower than peers who made optimization look effortless. A hybrid woman described a baseline school where she'd been bored by material she processed instantly, isolated by a capability gap from students who should have been peers. 2 hours of sharing confirmed what Siduri had experienced individually was a collective reality. Hybrids existed in space between populations, becoming a void rather than a bridge as enhanced and baseline diverged politically, economically, socially, and now biologically. We're exhausted, Siduri finally stated what no one had explicitly said. Exhausted from mediating between populations that don't value mediation. Exhausted from being neither. Exhausted from explaining ourselves to people who see us as symbols rather than listening to us as people. Exhausted from carrying a burden we didn't choose for a project that isn't working. Heads nodded around the circle. Exhaustion was a universal hybrid experience. Fatigue from perpetual inadequacy, from constant explanation, from endless positioning between populations that expected hybrids to bridge naturally when nothing about their existence felt natural. So what do we do? Davor asked, still seeking a constructive path forward. We stop pretending we're unified when we're not, Lyra said. We acknowledge that hybrids have different needs and different responses. Some will keep mediating. Some will seek independence. Some will align more with enhanced or baseline. We're individuals, not a collective solution to problems created by immortals. But partnership depends on hybrid mediation, Davor protested. If we withdraw, who bridges the populations? Why is that our responsibility? Yasmin demanded. Why are hybrids required to solve problems that enhanced consolidation and baseline resentment created? We didn't design political systems. We didn't create economic networks that reward capability. We didn't engineer genetics that are becoming incompatible. Why are we responsible for fixing systemic failures when neither population values our perspective? Because if we don't bridge them, they'll separate, Davor said. Enhanced consolidation will accelerate. Baseline marginalization will increase. Partnership will fail. Speciation will make separation irreversible. We're the only population positioned to prevent catastrophe. Positioned to prevent catastrophe or positioned to drown attempting to span a gap that keeps widening? Lyra countered. We've spent 50 years trying to bridge populations that are actively diverging. Maybe the bridge isn't sustainable when the gap keeps growing. Maybe attempting to span increasing distance exhausts us without preventing inevitable separation. The debate revealed fault lines within the hybrid population that mirrored the larger society. Some believed mediation was worth exhaustion if it prevented total separation. Others believed mediation was impossible when neither side valued their efforts. Some wanted to align with one population. Most just wanted to exist as individuals rather than performing a bridge function nobody appreciated. Siduri watched the gathering fragment around a question that had no satisfactory answer. Should hybrids continue attempting to bridge populations that were diverging, or acknowledge that neither population valued their efforts and choose their own paths? No consensus emerged. No unified hybrid response coalesced. The gathering, intended to address shared concerns, instead revealed that hybrids were as divided as the populations they were supposed to unite. As hybrids departed, Lyra approached Siduri. You're questioning the mediation role. Not a question. Observation based on decades of knowing Siduri. I'm questioning whether the bridge role is sustainable when biology is separating populations we're supposed to unite, Siduri replied. Whether continuing to mediate serves anyone when neither side listens. Whether I'm helping a partnership or exhausting myself performing a function nobody values. You could choose independence, Lyra suggested. Build a life that doesn't depend on either population. Stop performing the bridge role. Let enhanced and baseline manage their own conflict without hybrid mediation they don't appreciate. And abandon partnership completely? Acknowledge that the partnership has already abandoned hybrids. We were created as a solution. Now we're becoming the third marginalized population instead of a bridge between the two. Maybe an honest response is accepting that our existence proves the biological bridge doesn't work rather than continuing to perform a failing function. Siduri had no response. Lyra departed, leaving Siduri alone in a communal space built by hybrids for hybrids, wondering whether 50 years of mediation had achieved anything or just exhausted the population that never had a unified purpose. Tomorrow, she would confront her mother about the fertility diagnosis and larger questions about hybrid purpose. Would demand honesty about whether she was a daughter or a solution, a person or a tool, an individual or an experiment. 46 years of being neither. Time to stop bridging and start choosing what she was for herself. 3 days after diagnosis. Public Garden, Neutral Quarter, Uruk. Sophia's message had been brief: someone wants to help. An enhanced woman named Inara. Studies hybrid populations. Not healer, but listener. Sometimes listening helps when healing can't. Siduri met Inara in a neutral space, not an enhanced quarter where her inadequacy felt magnified, not a baseline quarter where her advantages felt apologized for, but a public garden where hybrids gathered because belonging nowhere meant being welcomed everywhere marginally. Perpetual middle position that exhausted through its very existence. Inara was an older enhanced human, maybe 70, with kind eyes that had seen too much and a face that suggested wisdom earned through observing rather than merely living. She moved with enhanced grace but without the unconscious superiority some enhanced humans carried as a proclamation of biological advantage. "Thank you for meeting," Inara said, voice gentle without being patronizing. "Sophia mentioned you're struggling. With a diagnosis. With identity. With a position between populations that seems to satisfy neither." "I'm fine." Siduri heard defensive reflex even as she spoke it. "It's just biology. Complicated biology." Thalia explained limitations. "I understand." Understanding cognitively isn't the same as accepting emotionally. Inara gestured to the garden bench, waiting for Siduri's consent before sitting. "I'm part of a group that watches patterns. Studies how hybrid populations develop across regions. Documents challenges most institutions overlook because hybrids exist between categories, falling through gaps in systems designed for enhanced or baseline but not both and neither." She didn't explain which group. Didn't offer details about purposes. Just stated fact that felt true despite, because of, its vagueness. "Your experience isn't unique," Inara continued carefully. 17% of hybrids face similar fertility challenges. 23% experience cognitive processing that feels inadequate from both directions, faster than baseline but slower than enhanced, belonging to neither fully. 31% report exhaustion from perpetual mediation, from being the bridge everyone walks across without considering the bridge's burden. Inara's work wasn't just a compassionate presence, it was systematic documentation. The Enochian order tracked hybrid fertility patterns across all major settlements, compiling data that Thalia herself lacked, despite having designed the genetic modifications that created enhanced humans. 17% of hybrids experience fertility challenges comparable to Siduri's. Another 23% showed reduced fertility without complete sterility. 41% maintained baseline-level reproductive capacity. 19% actually showed enhanced fertility, genetic modifications that improved rather than compromised reproductive success. The numbers told a story. Enhancement wasn't creating uniform outcomes. It was producing variable results that reflected the complexity of genetic modification interacting with individual biology, environmental factors, partner compatibility, and sheer chance. Siduri's experience wasn't a failure. It was a data point in a distribution that order members documented across 3 continents, preserving evidence that would someday inform questions about whether the enhancement's benefits justified its costs. Inara encoded observations after each counseling session, not cold clinical data but contextualized documentation that captured both biological fact and human experience. Fertility statistics mattered. So did the emotional weight of those statistics for people living them. The order preserved both. Numbers for mathematical analysis. Stories for human understanding. Evidence for comprehensive judgment when revelation came, and humanity asked whether a mortal intervention had helped or harmed. 17% of hybrids are struggling with fertility. 17% of a population that already occupied uncertain space between enhanced and baseline, neither fully one nor fully the other, biological reality complicating social identity that partnership institutions struggled to address. Inara had counseled 43 hybrids over 15 years of order service. 17% translated to 7 individuals whose experiences she knew intimately, faces behind statistics, lives behind data points, stories behind numbers. She would continue counseling, continue documenting, continue serving both populations while preparing evidence to support a revelation that would determine whether the covenant justified the suffering it documented. Both/and. Always both/and. The order's burden, preserving truth without judging it, recording suffering without ending it, serving the present while preparing the future that the current generation wouldn't see. Inara returned to her quarters beneath Harapa's temple complex, encoded complete records of today's counseling sessions, and transmitted observations through quantum channels to Memphis, where Methuselah coordinated order's comprehensive documentation. Tomorrow, she would counsel another hybrid. Document another experience. Preserve another data point. The order served. The order observed. The order is prepared. And in the spaces between populations, hybrids navigated identity complications that partnership institutions acknowledged but did not fully resolve. Numbers felt like validation. Didn't fix anything, biology didn't negotiate with statistics. But recognition that others struggled identically transformed personal failure into population pattern, individual inadequacy into systemic reality. That's not comfort, Inara said honestly. Statistics don't ease pain. But recognition matters. You're not failing individually. Biology is complicated. The partnership created a hybrid population without fully understanding its consequences. Now you live those consequences while institutions slowly realize that bridges require support, mediation demands resources, being neither and both comes with costs that partnership didn't anticipate. Why do you study this? Siduri asked, curiosity overcoming defensiveness. Why does an enhanced human spend time documenting hybrid struggles that don't affect enhanced populations directly? Inara considered the answer carefully. Because understanding matters. Because someday, maybe not in my lifetime, maybe not for centuries, humans will need to comprehend the full consequences of genetic modification. We'll need to see that creating enhanced humans produced expected advantages and unexpected costs. We'll need evidence showing hybrid populations earn dignity despite biology refusing to cooperate, maintain bridges despite exhaustion, serve partnership despite partnership serving them inadequately. She paused, offering truth without complete disclosure. I document because history demands honesty. Because future generations deserve understanding, the current generation can barely articulate. Because hybrid experiences matter, whether the partnership succeeds or fails, especially if it fails. Someone needs to explain what was tried, what was lost, what humanity attempted building across biological chasms that genetics made wider rather than bridgeable. Siduri studied her, searching for manipulation, and found only sincere interest that felt genuine despite its opaque purpose. I won't try fixing you, Inara said. Biology is biology. But I'll listen. It will validate struggles that the institutional framework overlooks. We'll document experiences so hybrid wisdom survives, whether or not hybrid populations do. Sometimes that documentation, that witnessing, helps more than false promises that problems have solutions. Siduri didn't know Inara was in the Enochian order. Didn't understand the documentation served as a revelation preparation that wouldn't arrive for centuries. Didn't comprehend that her struggles were being preserved for future judgment about whether immortal intervention produced triumph or tragedy. She just knew, someone listened. Someone validated. Someone recognized that being a hybrid meant carrying burdens that no population fully acknowledged because hybrids existed between categories where institutional vision blurred. That recognition mattered. More than solutions. More than fixes. More than promises that biology might cooperate if the partnership just tried harder. Someone witnessed. Someone remembered. Someone preserved her truth for purposes she couldn't comprehend but appreciated nonetheless. The order served through listening. Through witnessing. Through documenting realities that institutions overlooked while preparing for a revelation that would judge everything immortals had built and everything humans had suffered through, biological modifications that created advantages and costs simultaneously. Siduri left the garden feeling seen. Not fixed, not solved. But seen. Witnessed. Remembered. Sometimes that was enough. Had to be enough. Because biology didn't offer alternatives. Thalia reviewed the fertility data with growing concern. Reports from Harappa, Memphis, Damascus, and northern settlements, hybrid fertility patterns showing more variability than her original models predicted. She carefully designed the genetic modifications. Enhanced longevity, cognitive processing, immune function, and healing capacity, all modifications breeding true across generations with minimal complications. The enhanced population remained stable and healthy, demonstrating that the intervention could be sustained over millennia. But hybrid fertility was proving more complex than enhancement's direct effects. The data arrived through channels Ether maintained. He claimed it came from regional medical networks established during early partnership. comprehensive documentation from cities across the known world, compiled by unnamed observers, transmitted through a communication infrastructure she didn't fully understand but which consistently provided accurate information. 17% are experiencing significant fertility challenges. 23% showing reduced capacity. Patterns varied by region but averaged consistently across populations. Thalia added the data to her own research, grateful for intelligence that complemented her direct observations but wondering, not for the first time, who coordinated such systematic documentation across continents. She'd ask Ether. Eventually. After more pressing research was conducted. For now, the data served its purpose, informing her understanding of enhancement's long-term effects, helping her counsel baseline parents of hybrid children, and guiding her recommendations for future genetic modifications. Somewhere, someone was documenting hybrid experiences with sophistication that suggested organized purpose. Thalia appreciated the intelligence even without knowing its source. The order's work remained hidden for now. Partnership Council Chamber, Uruk. 8 days after the hybrid gathering. The council chamber was filled, 163 representatives from 17 regional councils. Enhanced humans, baseline humans, and 7 hybrids who'd served as mediators since the partnership's founding. Today's session was called to address the hybrid question whether hybrid representation in council decision-making should be modified, given what enhanced members were calling technical capacity limitations. Siduri sat in the hybrid delegation section, positioned between enhanced and baseline representatives, in an arrangement meant to symbolize a bridging function but felt like isolation. The other 6 hybrid representatives looked as exhausted as she felt. 50 years of mediating. 50 years of both sides talking past each other while claiming to value their perspective. Enkidu stood to open the debate. 45 years old, enhanced, Gilgamesh's grandson and probable successor. His presence signaled this wasn't a routine administrative discussion, this was political positioning for consolidation that was accelerating across multiple domains. This council was designed to enable all populations to participate in governance, and Enkidu began, his voice carrying authority that came from both capability and lineage. Partnership principles require that representation reflect not just population numbers but capacity to contribute meaningfully to decision-making. We've maintained equal hybrid representation for 50 years. But we must acknowledge that certain governance functions require optimal cognitive processing that hybrid representatives cannot provide. Siduri felt the familiar squeeze of being evaluated rather than heard. Enkidu wasn't arguing that hybrids shouldn't participate, that would explicitly violate the partnership. He argued they should participate differently, at reduced capacity, while acknowledging biological limitations without explicitly calling them inferior. Shearer responded immediately, the 63-year-old baseline leader whose own mortality contrasted sharply with enhanced peers who'd remain vital for another century. What you're proposing is exclusion disguised as optimization. Hybrid representatives have served the partnership effectively for 5 decades. They've mediated disputes, coordinated between populations, and provided perspectives neither enhanced nor baseline alone could offer. Now you want to reduce their authority because they're not enhanced enough. This proves consolidation isn't about capability, it's about maintaining advantage. It's about acknowledging reality, Carrot interjected, an enhanced merchant who'd spent decades dominating trade through cognitive advantages. Complex economic coordination requires processing speed that hybrids lack. Military strategy requires pattern recognition at levels that hybrid cognition can't achieve. Infrastructure planning requires optimization beyond hybrid capacity alone. We're not excluding hybrids, we're acknowledging they can't perform all functions equally. Then enhanced humans should be excluded from functions requiring patience, empathy, or understanding of baseline experience, countered Mira, a baseline engineer whose work focused on universal accessibility. If we're evaluating representatives by cognitive capability alone, we're abandoning partnership for meritocracy that enhanced humans designed to favor themselves. The debate crystallized around a question with no answer that satisfied both principle and pragmatism. Should governance optimize for capability or represent populations equally, regardless of capacity differences? Enhanced representatives argued that certain decisions required optimal processing. That slower deliberation cost lives when rapid response was necessary. That hybrid participation in technical matters created inefficiency that harmed everyone, including baseline populations who needed effective governance. Baseline representatives argued that political legitimacy required representation, not optimization. That excluding hybrids from decision-making because they weren't sufficiently enhanced proved that consolidation was about hierarchy rather than capability. That partnership, without inclusive representation, was performance rather than practice. Siduri listened to both sides debate about hybrids rather than with them. The 7 hybrid representatives hadn't been asked for their perspective. Both enhanced and baseline were arguing about what hybrid representation meant, what hybrid capacity was, and what hybrid participation should be, without acknowledging the actual hybrids present in the chamber. Finally, Davor stood. 42, hybrid, one of the representatives who'd spent 2 decades mediating between populations while being claimed by neither. You're debating about us without asking us. Both sides are using a hybrid representation as a weapon in the consolidation argument. Enhanced saying we're not capable enough. Baseline saying we're proof of partnership. Neither side is asking what we think or recognizing our exhaustion from being symbols rather than participants. The chamber quieted slightly. Hybrid voice is disrupting the debate about hybrid status. We've served as mediators for 50 years, Davor continued. Bridged populations through childhood when we learned faster than baseline peers but slower than enhanced. Bridged populations through education when neither system was designed for our processing speed. Bridged populations through career when we couldn't compete in enhanced networks but were seen as privileged in baseline communities. Bridged populations through partnership councils where both sides claim us as allies without listening to our perspectives. He gestured to the other hybrid representatives. 7 of us in the council of 163. Representing 300 hybrids total across all regions. Small population. Experimental population. Created to solve problems we didn't create. And now you're debating whether we're capable enough to participate fully in governance that both sides expect us to mediate. Siduri felt compelled to add her voice. Stood despite preferring silence, recognizing that hybrid silence would be interpreted by both sides as validation of their positions. I've spent 46 years attempting to bridge enhanced and baseline populations, experienced exclusion from both sides. Enhanced gatherings move too fast. I process 70% of conversations that require 100% capability. Baseline gatherings move too slow. I'm impatient with the pace that feels sluggish compared to my processing speed. She met Enkidu's eyes directly. You're correct that hybrids can't match enhanced processing speed. We can't optimize commerce like enhanced merchants. Can't calculate probabilities like enhanced administrators. Can't coordinate complex systems like enhanced engineers. We're biologically limited compared to enhanced capability. Then she turned to Sheror. But baseline representatives are also correct that excluding hybrids from decision-making proves consolidation is about hierarchy. If we start evaluating representation by cognitive capability, partnership becomes meritocracy, and enhanced humans will dominate. That political legitimacy requires inclusive participation regardless of capacity differences. The chamber was listening now. Hybrid voice articulating both sides' positions while occupying neither. The question you're debating isn't really about hybrid capacity, Siduri continued. It's about whether a partnership survives when biology determines capability and capability determines authority. Hybrids are evidence that biology creates a hierarchy that no institutional protection can overcome. We're not bridges, we're proof that enhanced and baseline are diverging biologically, politically, and economically. And you're using our inadequacy as justification for consolidation that was happening anyway. She sat down, aware she'd said more than was strategic, but exhausted by decades of diplomatic silence that accomplished nothing. The debate continued for 2 more hours. Enhanced representatives proposing that technical matters be decided by qualified representatives, coded language meaning enhanced only decision-making in areas they defined as requiring optimal processing. Baseline representatives argued that any exclusion violated partnership principles and enabled consolidation. The compromise that emerged satisfied nobody. Hybrid representatives would maintain voting rights, but specific technical coordination matters could be expedited through specialized committees that didn't require full council approval. Language carefully crafted to preserve the appearance of inclusion while creating mechanisms for enhanced decision-making without hybrid participation. The vote was close, 87 in favor, 76 opposed. Hybrid representatives split, 4 voting against a compromise that marginalized them, 3 voting for it is better than explicit exclusion. Siduri had voted against. Watched partnership institutions accommodate consolidation through language that masked exclusion as optimization. Recognized that the political dimension of hybrid marginalization was accelerating just like the economic and social dimensions. After the council session concluded, Enkidu approached. That was well articulated. You understand both positions. Understanding both positions is what hybrids do, Siduri replied. Doesn't mean either side listens or values our perspective beyond using it to support predetermined conclusions. Partnership can't prevent capability from determining outcomes, Enkidu said. You acknowledge that yourself. Enhanced humans are more capable. That capability produces authority. Constraining it serves the principle but harms the practice. And abandoning principle to enable practice creates tyranny that feels like meritocracy, Siduri countered. Which is why partnership is failing, because enhanced humans like you believe capability justifies hierarchy while baseline humans like Shearer recognize that hierarchy, even justified hierarchy, betrays the partnership you're claiming to preserve. She left before Enkidu could respond. Walked through the council building corridors, feeling the weight of political marginalization added to economic and social exclusion. Hybrids weren't just excluded from enhanced trade networks and baseline communities, they were also excluded from the broader society. They were being systematically excluded from political participation through mechanisms designed to sound reasonable while enabling consolidation. Tomorrow, she would confront her mother. Would demand honesty about whether Sophia had her as a daughter or as a solution. Whether hybrid existence was an experiment in bridge building or a mistake that created a third marginalized population. 46 years of questions. Time for answers. Sophia's residence, Uruk. Evening, the next day. Sophia's home reflected 52,000 years of accumulated aesthetic understanding applied to Bronze Age materials and constraints. Mud brick walls decorated with geometric patterns that pleased the eye, while encoding mathematical relationships that only enhanced cognition could fully appreciate. Read screens are positioned for optimal light diffusion and temperature control. Furniture arranged to facilitate conversation while accommodating different body sizes and cultural sitting preferences. A beautiful space designed by an immortal who understood human needs better than humans did themselves. Another asymmetry made a true partnership impossible. One population had 50,000 years of optimization experience, while the other was discovering agriculture. Siduri arrived as sunset painted the walls amber. Sophia was expecting her. Thalia had informed her about the fertility diagnosis, preparing her for a difficult conversation. But Sophia couldn't prepare for the questions Siduri had been accumulating for 46 years. Her mother greeted her at the entrance. 52,000 years old, appearing perhaps 35 in human terms. An immortal teacher who'd educated millions of humans across 6 millennia. Those who believed that knowledge liberated. Who'd had a hybrid daughter, believing that child would naturally bridge population she'd helped create. Siduri. I'm glad you came. Sophia's voice carried the warmth that Siduri had trusted her entire life, but was now questioning. Love or utility? Daughter or solution? Person or experiment? Thalia told you about the diagnosis, Siduri said, foregoing pleasantries that felt dishonest given the conversation that needed to happen. She did. I'm so sorry you're facing this challenge. Are you sorry I'm facing it, or sorry your bridge-building experiment produced unintended complications? The words were harsh. Harsher than Siduri had planned. But 46 years of being neither had accumulated into anger that medical diagnosis had crystallized rather than created. Sophia's expression shifted from maternal warmth to something more complex, recognition that they were having a conversation she'd perhaps been avoiding. Let's sit. This discussion deserves more than a doorway confrontation. They settled into the residence's central room. Oil lamps cast steady light. Reed screens filter the evening breeze. Beautiful space that couldn't make this conversation more straightforward. Did you have me for you or for humanity? Siduri asked directly. Did you want a daughter, or did you want to create a bridge between enhanced and baseline populations? Did you think about what my life would be like, or were you focused on solving the problem that the immortal intervention created? Sophia was silent for a moment that stretched long enough to be an answer in itself. Both, she finally said. I wanted a child. Wanted to experience motherhood. Wanted to love someone across generations the way immortals rarely can because we don't have children. And I also believed hybrid children would naturally bridge populations. That creating a biological middle ground would help the partnership survive by giving both sides a population that understood both perspectives. So I was daughter and solution. Person and tool. Individual and experiment. You are my daughter first, Sophia said, but the pause before our revealed truth more clearly than words. Past tense catching up to the present claim. Did you consider what hybrid life would be like? Siduri pressed. What would it mean to process faster than baseline but slower than enhanced? To fit nowhere? To be expected to bridge populations that don't value bridging? Did you think about whether I'd want this burden before creating me to carry it? I thought hybrid children would experience the best of both populations, Sophia said. Superior cognition compared to baseline, longer lifespan, better health. Access to immortal knowledge through me. I thought you'd have advantages rather than disadvantages. You thought wrong. Siduri's voice was flat, clinical, documenting a failed experiment. Hybrid existence is perpetual inadequacy from both perspectives. Enhanced enough to be impatient with baseline pace. Not enhanced enough to keep up with enhanced processing. Living longer than baseline, friends who age and die. Dying decades before enhanced peers who'll remain vital. Welcome nowhere. Belonging to neither. Expected to mediate while being excluded from both populations. She paused, letting the catalog of hybrid experience settle. And now we're discovering that 27% of hybrids have reduced fertility. That enhanced and baseline genetics are incompatible. That we're not bridges, we're evidence that populations you're trying to unite are biologically separating. You didn't create a solution. You created a third marginalized population that proves partnership doesn't work. Sophia was crying. Silent tears that acknowledged truth without offering defense. Immortal mother confronting the reality that her daughter's existence confirmed her mistake. I didn't know, Sophia said quietly. Didn't predict hybrid biology would be compromised. Didn't anticipate that creating a middle ground would produce exclusion rather than inclusion. Didn't fully consider what I was asking of you by having you partly solve the problem I contributed to creating through enhanced teaching that enabled the entire crisis. Didn't consider, Siduri repeated. That's the problem with the mortal intervention. You act on 50,000-year timescales without fully considering how your actions affect humans who live 60, 120, or 180 years. You're so focused on solving civilizational problems that you don't think about individual lives your solutions compromise. You're right. No defense. No justification. Just acknowledgement. Am I supposed to forgive you? Siduri asked. Accept that you meant well, even though you created life for someone, knowing they'd carry the burden you imposed. Did you experiment with creating a hybrid population without knowing if biology would work properly? That you used your daughter as a test case for a bridge-building project that's failing? No, Sophia said. You're not supposed to forgive me. You're supposed to be angry. Supposed to demand better than what I gave you. Supposed to choose your own path rather than performing the bridge function I hoped you'd naturally fulfill. Silence settled between them. Not comfortable. Not resolved. But honestly, in a way, their relationship had never been. I do love you, Sophia said. Not just as an experiment or a solution or a bridge. As a daughter. As a person. As an individual who exceeded every expectation I had and challenged every assumption I made. You're right that I had you partly to solve the problem. But you're more than a solution. You've always been more than what I hoped hybrid children would provide. More than you hoped but less than either population expects, Siduri replied. Story of hybrid existence. Always more and less simultaneously. Never quite enough from any perspective. What will you do? Sophia asked. Stop bridging, Siduri said. Stop performing functions nobody values. Stop exhausting myself mediating for populations that don't listen. Choose what I am for myself rather than what you hoped I'd be or what partnership expects. That's terrifying and liberating simultaneously, Sophia said. Yes. Like everything about hybrid existence. Perpetually experiencing contradictions, neither population understands. Siduri stood to leave. The conversation wasn't resolved, it couldn't be, because the facts couldn't be changed. Sophia had her partly for an instrumental purpose. Siduri existed in a biological middle ground that produced perpetual exclusion. Hybrids were an experimental population created to address a problem whose insolvability proved its existence. But they'd been honest. Raw honesty that hurt but clarified. Not forgiveness but acknowledgement. Not resolution, but a genuine relationship, accepting the complicated history rather than pretending it didn't exist. "I'm still your daughter," Siduri said at the entrance. "But I'm not your bridge. Not anymore. Maybe I never really was." "You're my daughter," Sophia agreed. "And I'm sorry I didn't fully consider what that would mean for you when I brought you into the world partly to solve a problem that wasn't yours to fix." Siduri walked back through Uruk's streets feeling the weight of confrontation that changed nothing about her reality but clarified it. Motherhood had her partly as a solution. Hybrid biology that was compromised. Populations that were diverging despite partnership institutions designed to unite them. Tomorrow, the hybrid representatives will meet again to decide whether to continue mediating, after the council voted to marginalize them politically, a collective decision about whether the bridge function is sustainable. 46 years of being neither. Time to decide what hybrids were for themselves. Hybrid representatives meeting, Uruk. 2 days after the mother-daughter confrontation. 7 hybrid representatives gathered in the same communal space where a larger hybrid gathering had met weeks earlier. 7 individuals who'd spent decades mediating between enhanced and baseline populations while being excluded from both. Meeting to discuss whether to continue the bridge function after the council vote that marginalized them. Davor opened the discussion. Council vote means hybrids are excluded from technical decision-making even while maintaining representation. We're present but increasingly powerless. Still expected to mediate but with less authority to implement mediated solutions. The question is whether we continue attempting the bridge function under these constraints. "We've been attempting bridge function under constraints our entire existence," said Adinya, 53, hybrid representative from Egyptian territories. "Enhanced too fast, baseline too slow, politics too complex, economics too consolidated, social networks too exclusive. Constraints are constant. Council vote just makes them explicit." "Explicit marginalization is different from implicit exclusion," Lyra countered. She wasn't the official representative, but attended as an advocate for hybrid independence. When exclusion is coded into institutions, it's permanent. When it's a social practice, it can shift. By accepting reduced authority, we're legitimizing consolidation that will only accelerate. By refusing to participate, we're abandoning partnership completely, Davor argued. Enhanced and baseline need mediators even if they don't appreciate mediation. Someone has to bridge them. If not hybrids, then who? Why is bridging our responsibility? Siduri asked. The same question Yasmin had raised in a larger gathering. Same question she'd been asking herself for 46 years. Why are hybrids required to solve the consolidation crisis? We didn't create? Required to mediate between populations that exclude us? Required to exhaust ourselves performing a function nobody values? Because we're positioned between them, Davor said. Because we understand both perspectives. Because partnership survives only if someone bridges the divide that's growing. Or partnership survives only if enhanced and baseline choose it themselves rather than depending on a hybrid mediation they don't respect, Lyra countered. We've been enabling their avoidance of real choice by performing a bridge function that lets both sides pretend partnership works. Maybe withdrawing hybrid mediation forces them to confront the reality that partnership requires their choice, not our exhaustion. The debate revealed the same divisions as a larger hybrid gathering. Some representatives believed mediation was sustainable and necessary. Others believed it was impossible and damaging. Some wanted to maintain the bridge function despite constraints. Others wanted to withdraw and force enhanced and baseline to manage their own conflict. What if we're asking the wrong question? Said Kemuel, who joined the representatives' meeting despite not being an official member. The question isn't whether to mediate. The question is whether to mediate on their terms or our terms. Whether to continue accepting marginalization while attempting to bridge function, or demand genuine inclusion as a condition of participation. They won't give genuine inclusion, Adinya said flatly. Enhanced humans dominate through capability. Baseline humans can't match them. Hybrids are caught in the middle without the power to demand terms. We participate on their terms, or we don't participate. Then maybe we don't participate, Yasmin said, also attending despite not being representative. Maybe an honest response to marginalization is withdrawal rather than continued performance of a function that enables their avoidance of real choice. That's abandoning partnership when it needs us most, Davor protested. That's acknowledging that partnership abandoned us first, Yasmin replied. We were created to bridge. Instead, we're marginalized. An honest response is accepting failure rather than continuing to perform a failing function. The 7 official representatives eventually voted. 4 chose to continue mediation despite constraints. 3 chose to withdraw from active bridge function, a split decision reflecting a split population. Hybrids are fragmenting like the society they were supposed to unite. Siduri had voted to withdraw. Not forever. Not definitely. But temporarily, to allow the enhanced and baseline to experience partnership without hybrid mediation. They took it for granted. To force them to confront the reality that bridging required a choice they weren't making, rather than performance hybrids provided. I'll maintain a representative position, Siduri explained. We'll attend councils. We'll document decisions. But won't actively mediate. Won't bridge populations that don't value bridging. We'll let them experience partnership without a hybrid buffer that enables their avoidance of genuine choice. The 4 who voted to continue mediation respected her decision, even as they disagreed. The 3 who voted to withdraw joined her approach. 7 representatives producing 4 different responses, continuing active. Mediation, continuing but reduced, withdrawing but maintaining position, withdrawing completely. Fragmentation that mirrored the hybrid population's lack of unified purpose. Scattered response to marginalization from a scattered population that had never truly been a collective bridge. As the meeting concluded, Davor approached Siduri. You're exhausted. Yes, Siduri agreed, simple truth requiring no elaboration. I understand why you're withdrawing. But a partnership needs mediators. Needs someone attempting a bridge, even when both sides don't appreciate it. Partnership needs to be enhanced and baseline choosing justice over capability, Siduri countered. Needs them to make daily decisions to constrain advantages rather than optimize outcomes. Hybrids can't provide that choice. Can only buffer their avoidance of it. Maybe removing buffer forces real choice. Or maybe removing the buffer accelerates the collapse, Davor said. Maybe, Siduri acknowledged. But hybrid mediation clearly isn't preventing collapse and just delaying it while exhausting us. Perhaps a collapse delayed is worse than a collapse confronted. Perhaps forcing a crisis reveals whether a partnership can survive rather than prolonging performance that makes failure feel survivable. She left the meeting feeling a paradoxical combination of relief and guilt. Relief from stepping back from exhausting mediation. Guilt about abandoning the partnership when it was fracturing. Both feelings are valid. Both feelings are complicated. Both feelings are quintessentially hybrid. Thalia's laboratory, medical district. Late evening, same day. Thalia worked alone in her laboratory, analyzing data from hybrid population health assessments conducted over the past 3 months. 55,000 years of biological expertise applied to understanding the human population she'd created without fully predicting consequences. The data displays showed chromosomal structures, genetic compatibility analyses, reproductive system assessments, lifespan projections, and comparisons of cognitive processing. Quantifying hybrid biology that was compromised in ways she hadn't anticipated when encouraging enhanced baseline unions 50 years ago. 27% reduced fertility. 8% of reproductive challenges are significant. The pattern suggesting enhanced and baseline genetics were incompatible at the fundamental level. Speciation that was accelerating despite partnership institutions designed to unite populations. Biology was dividing. She pulled up a comparative analysis, enhanced versus baseline chromosomal structure. The differences were stark. Enhanced optimization had created a genetic configuration that baseline humans lacked. Not a simple modification, a comprehensive restructuring that affected multiple biological systems. Cognitive processing, cellular repair, metabolic efficiency, and immune response. Enhanced humans were optimized across nearly every measurable function. Baseline humans retained the original human genetics that evolved over hundreds of thousands of years, optimized for different environments, challenges, and evolutionary pressures. Effective within their design parameters. just fundamentally different from enhanced optimization. Hybrids contain both genetic configurations. Most biological systems accommodated this by averaging the middle ground function between the enhanced and baseline states. But some systems, particularly reproductive, required compatibility that averaging couldn't provide. Chromosomal structures that needed to align precisely. Genetic expressions that needed to be coordinated exactly. Biological processes that couldn't compromise without failing. The result was reduced fertility in a significant percentage of the hybrid population. Evidence that the enhanced and baseline were becoming separate species unable to interbreed successfully. She projected the speciation timeline based on current genetic divergence rates. Best estimate, the enhanced and baseline populations would become reproductively isolated within 5 to 8 centuries, assuming current mixing patterns continue. It could be faster if populations were socially separated before biological speciation was complete. It could be slower if extensive genetic mixing occurred in intermediate generations. But the trajectory was clear. Enhanced and baseline humans were diverging into separate species. The partnership sought to unite populations that biology was separating at the cellular level. She documented her findings with clinical precision, masking creator guilt. She'd made enhanced humans, optimized their biology, and encouraged the hybrid population. Had believed she was improving the human condition through biological advancement. Instead, she'd created a speciation crisis that would divide humanity permanently, had fractured a single species into separate populations that couldn't reproduce with one another. Had produced a hybrid population that experienced biological consequences of incompatibility while attempting to bridge the divide. Their existence proved unbridgeable. Thalia stood in her laboratory, surrounded by data confirming her mistake. Enhancement she'd designed to help humans had created a hierarchy she couldn't undo and speciation she couldn't prevent. Biology she'd optimized was separating populations faster than partnership institutions could unite them. She thought about Siduri met Inara in a public garden where hybrids gather, because belonging nowhere means being welcomed everywhere, marginally. You're not failing. Biology is complicated. Kind words. True words. Insufficient words. Inara is in the Enochian order. Documenting hybrid experiences while providing support that institutions can't. Siduri will never know that her suffering is being preserved for a revelation that won't come in her lifetime. 17% of hybrids face fertility challenges. The bridge population is crumbling. That's the intervention's burden, creating populations that suffer from the help you provided. In Chapter 5, The Scholar's Resistance, we meet Aga. 25 years old. Baseline human. Scholar. He's developing a philosophy that challenges everything enhanced consolidation assumes. Worth isn't determined by capability. Justice isn't optimized through efficiency. Equality means equal voice despite unequal ability. Dignity requires recognition, not modification. Sophia teaches him. The immortal whose genetic modifications created enhancement now helps a baseline human develop a philosophy that resists everything enhancement represents. And beneath Uruk's temple, Damon encodes Aga's work for preservation across millennia. Former questioner. Now an order member. When revelation comes, when biological hierarchy feels natural, humans will need Aga's voice saying capability doesn't determine worth. Philosophy is resistance when resistance is all baseline humans have left. Join me for Chapter 5, available now, link in the description. If you believe dignity transcends capability, please subscribe and share with philosophers and anyone questioning